How are you, mate? Thank you for coming in. It's lovely to see you again.
It's good to be here.
We don't normally film things. In fact, in my time here in the last couple of years, we have never filmed anything. So this is a testament to your rock royalty and also to the fact that they actually cleaned the windows beforehand as well.
Well, spit shine the windows, that's what I asked for.
Did you? Is that part of your rider, is it?
Yeah, it is, actually, everywhere I go.
You like to be looked at, but more clearly.
Yeah, I want people to see the dirt clearly.
Yeah, okay, good. In fact, you said that when we talked about the album and stuff being available on vinyl, you liked to hear the dirt clearly as well.
Yeah,
we had a lovely chat about Big Black last time, I think.
We did, yeah.
SST.
Songs about fucking.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the name of the new album, because there was a lot of thought and a lot of conjecture among the fans who said, you know, the Shattered Q was one of the names they came up with, and 25 as well.
Well, I guess 25 just means August 25th, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, but eventually Villains.
Yeah, Villains, yeah. I mean, I think it's good to sort of finger the fans.
Yeah.
You know?
I've thought that too. Not as much as I used to, unfortunately.
Yeah,
you know?
well, you really need to get out more. I think that the chance to sort of unleash things and enjoy the releasing of stuff at a pace that's sort of torturous but fun at the same time.
Of course. You said, and we spoke about this on the phone as well, wanting to take the songs in a new direction, but still at the same time essentially keeping your signature sound. So it's sort of a foot in both camps, isn't it, really?
Well, I think, oftentimes people get fixated on the example of an idea as if it were the idea itself instead of just a way to explain the idea.
Sure.
So I think in a lot of ways we took our old examples of the idea, which is Queens, and threw them on the fire and lit that on fire in the first song, you know?
Yeah.
And in a way to clear out space for something new to come in.
I think it's great. I think it's a really good sound. It's, I think, something that we needed as well in rock. And we even talked before about hardcore as well, that if you keep just going down the same road of the 2.5 minute, 3 minute song, you know, you're just going to end up with the same product over and over. And it kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
Well, I think you end up shrinking down the window of possibility to surprise somebody, including yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be willing and able to surprise yourself first, you know.
So that was the idea when you went in the studio to challenge yourself?
Yeah, I think, to defy our own expectations by way of redefining them a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, too, that, there's such a push to maybe copy yourself or, copy someone else, or people lose the plot, or, people are afraid to take a risk. And I think you have to encourage each other to take a risk, and the bigger the risk, sort of the bigger the reward, possibility.
Mark Ronson's was an interesting choice. Was he the first choice that you had?
He was the only choice I had.
Only choice, okay.
Yeah.
And did you know much of his back catalogue? Are you a fan of stuff like Amy Winehouse?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think he's very beat-centric. I think a lot of people have been like, why Mark Ronson? And my answer was always like, exactly.
Yeah.
And part of going to new places, you have to allow yourself to do it. You can't just say that and not do anything.
Yeah.
It can't just be like rhetoric,
Well, I mean, I guess the naysayers, when they hear something like this, especially the purist or traditional rock and roll fans, are going to go, hang on a second, that's moving into an area that we don't understand. But I guess the vindication is once you hear the track, do you know what I mean? You go, hang on a second.
I love that, though.
Yeah?
I love that it could start an argument at first.
Yeah.
I'm here to start some shit.
Okay.
I'm not here to blend in. I'm here to start some shit.
Great name for a tour.
Yeah. Well, blend in or start some shit.
We're here to start some shit. I like it.
Because I think if you want to blend, there's enough of that for you to choose from. And I'm here to make some noise. I'm here to make Saturdays out of Mondays and midnight out of noon.
Exactly. You are the Dark Prince.
The Duck Prince.
The Duck Prince, my favourite area. Came up on stage with bills, In fact, I gave you an idea to come out on stage at the Madison Square Garden gig with boxing gloves, and you shot me down. You didn't like my idea.
Well, it's not that I didn't like it, it's that I hated it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's quickly define what's going on here. Now, I'm not sure if this is indicative of the album, and I know that there's been another track floating around.
All I heard was indicative. I'm sorry.
As far as the dick of the album is concerned, Feet Don't Fail Me, Feet Don't Fall Me, is it Fall Me or Fail Me?
Feet Don't Fail Me.
Feet Don't Fail Me.
But they can, yeah.
Yeah, because that's a track that is another one that's floating around that people can get a taste of the album from. But is it similar
take a lick.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're not hearing the beginning. You're not hearing... I think that once you hear that track in its entirety, it will make sense, you know. You're hearing just little pieces of it off off stuff that we've kind of released.
Yeah.
But they're only little piecemeal chunks of it.
Yeah.
So I think, you have to get more than a lick.
Yeah. Well, I
As they
feel
say.
that sometimes too, especially if you're wearing a bill, it's best to give more than the lick.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
You told me this great story, and I don't know whether or not it was true or whether it's folklore, that you got a phone call from Elton John on a Sunday morning wanting to
did.
do some collaboration.
I did. I was holding my son,
Yeah.
and we were talking business. He's only 7 months old at the time. We were talking business, and yeah, I got a call from Elton John.
Wanting to do some work with you.
Yeah, that was for the last record.
Yeah. And did you think, hang on a second, this is somebody?
Well, he said, "Josh, it's Elton," and so I just almost hung up right away.
As you do. What about Iggy Pop? That collaboration was fantastic. Being able to work with somebody of that stature as well.
Yeah, I mean that was the coolest thing I've ever been allowed to be part of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was really wonderful.
When he did the Raw Power album, I know they've tried to remaster that, and I remember one of the stories was, that he just stood behind the desk and turned everything up, and he said, "That's how it should sound." Did he give you any kind of direction like that with what he wanted?
No, I think where Raw Power is aptly titled and absolutely unremixable. I'd always said I'd love to make an album with Iggy. I would do this, but over the years that changed, and I think. Now he's 70, and I think his perspective now is almost more vital than it ever was because, that 68-year-old perspective in rock, someone who's flung themselves on the fire many times, is not very often represented.
Yeah.
And certainly not always represented well when it is represented. So I was glad to just be any part of putting across the reality of someone as iconic as Iggy Pop.
And you mentioned reality as well, because here's someone who wasn't afraid to cut himself on stage by way of saying, there is nothing that you can do to me that I'm not afraid to do to myself.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can't. Only I can hurt me. You can't hurt me.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's fantastic. And I don't know whether we can still see that kind of, authenticity coming through in rock. I mean, apart from yourself, obviously,
Oh, geez, you had to add that at the end.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean that by way of sincerity and flattery, of course, as well. Because, when you see shows like, there are so many, I guess, disposable TV shows.
I think there's a lot of shows, but, and in music, there's a lot of shows, and that's fine. But I think the wildness and singularity of being in a band where it's not a show, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I don't really want to know. I'd rather open it up at the same moment you do.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to take it wherever it's supposed to go. And I can't really speak for anyone else or to anyone else's thing because to each his own, Yeah. I just know I have to know that it only is happening tonight and that's it.
Sure. And I've seen a few shows, and it always seems as though everything's going smoothly. I don't know what's going on behind the scene, but is there any sort of pivotal moment when you're on stage where you suddenly go, "This is just the greatest show we've ever done"?
I think in a way you're almost better defined by what you do when it goes south.
Okay.
Because you have something go wrong, or drums or guitar or something, or something that was supposed to work doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if you can pick it up and make that song following that the best song of the night.
Yeah.
And, the willingness to say, all right, well, that's done. So what? Let's move.
Yeah.
I like those. I like that sort of stuff,
We're filming this at the moment, and one of the interesting things about now as opposed to 10 years ago, and it's only been that brief, is that anything that you film suddenly becomes public domain,
Yeah,
and I mentioned that.
It stays on till the power goes off. That's
Exactly.
That's why I urge you to reconsider.
That's it. It's too late now. It's out there. I can't grow my hair
Thank
back.
God you're filming radio nowadays.
Figure that shit out. I don't know. And the reason I mentioned that was because I found something the other day with you and Brody, of course your wife, and Butch Vig doing Cheap Trick's Surrender at one of your daughter's events.
Yeah. Probably the last time I'm going to do that shit.
Well, the one thing I loved about Cheap Trick Surrender is one of the first songs ever to actually reference another band name in the in the lyrics with Kiss.
Yeah.
Nowadays the rappers are all doing that, although albeit their own name.
Right. Yeah. And what's funny is I bumped into Cheap Trick about 4 days after that. I was in London at the train station. I bumped into them.
Yeah.
And I told Rick Nielsen. I said, I just played this thing, and he goes, who cares?
Okay, isn't that the worst? I saw Paul Weller once in a train station in London, and I ran down the platform and I said, "Oh man, I just want you to know that I'm a really, really big fan." And he's like, "Yeah."
No, well, Cheap Trick is great, and
Yeah.
and I've had the luxury of becoming friends, the acquaintances with them over the years. And I love that was his response, because I thought, who cares, actually, But yeah, it is what it is, I guess, huh?
Yeah, well, after I'd said it, I then felt the compulsion to run after him again and go, "Look, I just want you to know that I work on the radio. I'm not just a fan." And I'm like, "Oh, just shut the hell up. I'm making myself worse here,
Well, I think these days people want you to see what they had for breakfast,
Yeah,
but
I
I
think so,
urge
yeah.
you to understand no one gives a shit what you had for breakfast.
Yeah. I want to ask you about a couple of other things. One is that you're doing some movie soundtrack stuff as well, which is for the score for the film In the Fade.
Yeah, I did it already. It was at Cannes, and yeah, it's a really interesting movie, and because it's also in German, and so I felt like there was this cool detachment to it all that, and it has a certain pacing and a certain style that maybe wouldn't in the States go over as well. But I just felt like it was a bit more, frankly, German and arty.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea of the direction you wanted to go in? I remember the first time I saw one of my favorite artists was Joe Jackson, and he did the Mike's Murder movie soundtrack. That was back in the 80s. And Stuart Copeland did Rumblefish and stuff like that as
Which
well.
I love, too.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Because there's a difficulty making it incidental as opposed to it actually being integral to the film, if you know what I mean.
Well, I've turned down a lot of stuff like that because there needs to be a certain amount of free reign and a certain amount of listening on my part. I want to listen and hear what they have to say, but I also want the music to have a shot at being something important for the film, and not just pastiche. And background noise.
Yeah.
But yet I don't expect it to be at the forefront either. There's a delicate balance there of finding the right relationship.
Yeah.
And because he had, I think, I felt comfortable because, I mean, the movie's called In the Fade, which is named after a Queen's song anyways. And so I felt he understood me.
Yeah.
And also, in all honesty, there was only 2 weeks to do it. So whatever I put, he really wasn't going to have a choice anyway. But I also felt that created this tension that was beautiful, that was necessary in the movie. And I wanted him to be happy, and I really did. And I wanted to listen to him. And so there was this beautiful moment of, you have to get it right on the first try.
Yeah.
And there was only one thing he wanted to make an adjustment with. And so I felt proud that we could get where he wanted.
Yeah.
And not where I wanted.
Yeah.
In one try.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you live as well. Mate, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. I can't wait for the new album as well. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you for having me.